This is the second part of the series on how I built a trailer for my plane. In the first part we covered how I selected the camper, how I removed the cabin and how the chassis was rebuilt. And finally it was time to start building. I checked of course how other people built similar trailers and had several options to choose from. The most traditional way is to build a wooden structure, then glue walls from styrofoam, and then cover it with fiberglass. I'm not that good with woodworking, and I wanted to avoid using wood as much as possible after seeing all the rotten wood in the old trailer. Another option was to use sandwich panels, like in this video, which can be cut and fixed together with some profiles. I checked that option, but in Sweden they sell those only to businesses, so getting those would be challenging. And there was also an option to build a metal frame and cover it with aluminum sheets, similar to how this trailer is built. But I wanted to avoid condensation on the inside, so in that case I would have to glue some insulation on the inside. It would still be a good option, but I decided to go another way. Another approach is what Peter Schrippel is using in this video, and that is probably most close to what I did. By the way, if you don't follow him yet, I would strongly recommend to check his channel. He's building cool RC planes and boats, and even built few ultralight airplanes. He built his trailer by welding a metal frame, then gluing styrofoam to it, and finally covering it with aluminum sheets on the outside and wooden ply on the inside. Building this way is nice and fast, but I don't think it was strong enough for my goals. I wanted the roof to be able to handle at least a meter of snow, which we can easily get in a few days here in Sweden. So I decided to build a metal frame, then use epoxy to glue styrofoam panels to it, cover it with fiberglass from the top and the bottom, and paint on the outside. This way I would get a strong and light cabin with some insulation to avoid condensation, and without using any wood that could mold with time. I took all the measurements of the chassis, checked how much I could extend the cabin to the front and still be able to maneuver without the risk of hitting the car. Then I made a 2D drawing of the build, but of course you don't start building just from 2D model. You have to make a 3D model first. I'm not that good in 3D CAD, but luckily it was Christmas time, so I built one from gingerbread. Yeah, that looks about right. Now we can start building the thing. The metal frame was built from a rectangular pipe with dimensions 20 by 20 millimeters, with a wall thickness of 1.5 millimeter. It can of course not handle high loads, but the frame was just to provide a structure for gluing the styrofoam sandwich panels, which would carry most of the load. Since it was winter, I decided to weld some parts of the metal frame inside the garage and then start to weld those to the chassis. I welded first 2 side frames in the garage and then proceeded with welding everything else outside. Here you can see almost a ready frame. These metal inserts are for mounting ramp door latches. I welded also 1mm thick angle profiles around, which would support the floor. They don't need to handle high loads also, since the floor is mainly supported by the chassis. Then it was time to glue styrofoam panels, and as you can see, I already bought those at that point. There were several options with styrofoam. You can buy EPS, expanded polystyrene, or XPS, extruded polystyrene, in different density and load classes. The lowest density is EPS S80, then there is EPS S100 and S200. And the XPS starts with 200 and goes up to 400. The best is, of course, to take styrofoam with the highest density and loading class, but of course those are more expensive. As you can see from a spreadsheet I made, for 30mm styrofoam, the price of EPS per square meter almost doubles when you go from class 80 to 200, and then it triples if you choose XPS. For 50mm styrofoam, the difference was not that big. Another important factor is that it's hard to find relatively thin boards of larger sizes. Most qualities were available only in 1.2 times 0.6 meter sizes. I want to use the larger size, 2.4 by 1.2 meter, which would give me less joints. So in the end I selected the EPS S200 option in 40mm thickness. The metal frame was built so that I had exactly 1.2 meters between the members, but I had to cut the styrofoam to the right lengths and also make grooves on all four edges so that the styrofoam sheets will be flush with the metal on the inside. I found the easiest way was just to temporarily fix the big sheets and then mark with an ink pen on the inside where to cut and where to make grooves. To cut the styrofoam sheets, I built this fixture so that I could fix a sheet and make a straight cut with a hot wire at the right place. I also made these extra wooden planks which could be fixed on both sides so that I could cut it at a specific angle, which I actually used. Also I thought of using it to make smooth edges on the boards, which didn't work that well. For cutting the grooves I used this foam cutter pan and a voltage control to regulate the power. I marked the center line of each board, which would give me 2 centimeter deep grooves, and then just run the pan along the lines. It didn't go fast, and sometimes I cut too deep, sometimes not deep enough, so in the end I had to use a knife to remove the edge pieces. Also I had to level the edges with the sander and remove some extra material sometimes. I used the same sander to make rounded edges on the top and the bottom of the boards. When I was half done preparing the boards for gluing, Pete released his video where he used router to cut similar grooves, which was a very good idea. At that time I didn't have any router, and I thought it worked well with the XPS but would just rip chunks from EPS. So I finished it with the foam pen. Later I did buy a router for another project and tested it on a waste piece, and it actually worked real good. I would have saved lots of time and got a better finish by using a router. I glued the styrofoam with the same epoxy I used later for laying most of fiberglass. It's a German brand, seems to be a good quality product. In the end I switched to a Swedish product because the delivery time for the German one was very long. It is also a good quality resin for less demanding applications, a bit more expensive than the German brand. For making glue and later filler, I thickened the resin with the microbubbles. If you don't know, you cannot use polyester resin with styrofoam since it dissolves the styrofoam. Epoxy is like 2 to 4 times more expensive, but you have no choice. It has to be epoxy. Gluing was straightforward. It was just mixing off resin, add microbubbles, spread in the grooves, press in the board, and fill more where needed, and then clean up. By the way, the metal was thoroughly cleaned and degreased before gluing, since it already started to rust just after a few rains. For fiberglass, I use mostly plain weave of 300 grams per square meter. I got a roll which was a leftover for very cheap. It was not enough, so in the end I bought a few meters of twill weave. Twill is what you need if you want to use it for curved objects, like if you are building a plane, since it adapts to shape real well. But it turned out to be a disadvantage if you're trying to lay a rectangular piece as I did, since it changes the shape very easily. The disadvantage of plain weave is, on the other hand, is that the surface is very rough and it needs much more fill-in afterwards. Before laying the fiberglass on the trailer, I wanted to see how high loads a sandwich panel can support if it is covered with one layer of 300 grams per square meter fiberglass fabric on each side. Then I could decide if I should increase it to 2 layers in areas like roof or in the front of the cabin. I made a test piece of styrofoam covered with 1 layer of fiberglass on each side. It was 2 meter long, so the same length as the width of the trailer. And then I tested how much weight it can support before breaking. It was a 19 centimeter wide piece. I loaded it with 65 kilos. It bent pretty severely and then finally broke. I calculated that load is equivalent to 175 kilos per square meter, that is around 36 pounds per square foot. In Stockholm, where I live, the house roofs has to be designed to handle at least 200 kilos per square meter. So my 175 is a bit less than that. But then I have also the metal members, which also adds up to strings, so it almost fulfill the requirements for house roofs, which is pretty good. I would still probably clean it from snow after severe snowstorms, but would not bother about it most of the years. When all the styrofoam was glued, it was time to lay fiberglass. The width of the roll that I had was around 95 centimeters. And originally I planned to lay it in big pieces that start from the bottom of one side, then go up, then cover the roof, and then go down on the other side. Thinking about it now, it probably could have worked, but I wanted to avoid working with two big pieces, so I decided to start one piece from the middle of the roof and finish it at the bottom of a wall, then lay another one on the opposite side, making some overlap in the middle of the roof. Then I would move back to another side and lay another piece. Working that way, I could make overlaps before the resin cured. About 2 hours after I laid the piece, I would come back and apply a filler directly to fill those holes in the plain weave. The resin was still tacky, and I think it was better that way than needing to sand it and fill afterwards. The first day I covered around half of the rectangular part of the cabin. Then after a few days I got help from my cousin and we covered the rest, but not the very front. Okay, so it's almost done from the outside. I put some insulation on top of the plastic to protect it from rain. This side is, I used the filler, epoxy plus micro bubbles, the fill. I did it on top also, but not on these sides. I was actually too short of micro bubbles. So the aim is to be able to sand it more easily, so that you don't like sand off the fiberglass. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. The front part I did few weeks later. I always ended each section with a stripe of peel ply, so I didn't need to sand it before doing an overlap and laying a new piece. Before laying the floor, I laid a stripe of fiberglass on the inside of the cabin. Otherwise I would not be able to cover the styrofoam completely when the floor was built. The first layer of the floor was form plywood. It is rather water resistant, not as good as marine plywood, but it is pretty good. I glued it with silicone to the chassis and fixed with screws from below. Then it was a layer of styrofoam. On the joints of the plywood I had wooden planks the same thickness as the styrofoam, so that I could screw the boards both from the bottom and the top. Then finally a layer of OSB screwed down to the wooden planks. All the edges around the perimeter were filled with silicone, both when laying the form plywood and the OSB. I didn't glue the styrofoam. This way it would be easy to replace the OSB if I needed to. Also, if I would need to replace the floor completely, the cabin would not be affected. When the floor was almost finished, I fixed the back door. First I screwed the OSB on the inside and then glued the styrofoam from the outside. It was already October and I managed to glue it the last days when the temperature still didn't drop too low during the night. Covering it with the fiberglass was not a priority, so it was done the next year. Now the cabin was watertight, but since the fiberglass was only on the outside, the roof was weak and I wanted to cover it from the inside before the snow. As you can see, I glued triangular pieces between the walls and the roof before. I started by wetting the styrofoam, then I used this wooden structure to support a piece of fiberglass fabric while I glue it with the resin to the roof. I finished with the peel ply on all the edges where the overlap would be. To save time, I decided not to cover all the roof, but just lay one piece between every two metal members, so it was like 95 centimeters of fabric and then 25 of not covered and then fabric again. I finished the joints between those pieces next year. My technique of laying fiberglass on the roof worked well. I had a problem only with one piece. When I moved too fast, it fell down on me, but I managed to put it back. I rushed during the summer to be on time before the winter, but if I spent a little bit more time then, it would be much easier now. I could of course pre-cover the roof pieces of the styrofoam with fiberglass on one side before gluing it to the metal structure, and then just lay small pieces of fiberglass and join it all together. The last pieces were laid when the first snow came, so I had to preheat the cabin, and when I was ready I tried to insulate the cabin with extra pieces of styrofoam, both on the inside and on top of the roof, and then I ran an electric heater overnight controlled by a thermostated outlet, so that the temperature inside was around 17 degrees centigrade. The next year I had to finish the joints on the roof, covered the walls from the inside and cover the front of the cabin. Covering the straight walls worked quite okay. I just wetted the styrofoam and then used masking tape to temporarily fix a piece of fiberglass, then wetted it and removed the masking tape. The hardest was this front part. My wife helped me to hold the pieces. It would be impossible to do it myself, especially since I was using twill weave and it was changing shape all the time. The most boring part is always sanding and then filling and sanding again. I'm pretty sure my neighbors agree with that, especially since I used the small cheap 12 centimeter sander, which was extremely efficient in transforming electricity to sound waves. I tried not to work more than 1 to 2 hours per day to not bother them too much. In the end, I probably sanded it 3 times, but it anyway looked far from smooth. In the end, I just gave up and painted it. I used this polyurethane paint. It is a good brand and it was relatively cheap comparing to other options. I paid 280 euros for 10 liters. First I plan on using an air gun to have a better finish, but I was afraid of it smelling too much, and polyurethane is nasty stuff. So I used a fine roller and actually it didn't smell that bad. Painting the first layer, I started from the beginning and was moving to the end by painting both of the walls and the roof little by little, so that I don't need to do joints to the paint that already dried. Painting the next layers, I didn't bother about it and just did it side after side. Okay, so that's how it looks after the first painting, and as you can see it's better than it was, but especially here when like the two layers, or yeah, first I painted this one, then went on the other side, then when I came back it will get thicker here and all of these like connections are more visible. So for the next round I'll try to go first up and then around like that, and then I'll have actually the connections up there and probably it won't be visible on the edge. Alright, now we're ready with the second one, and on the camera you still can see the stripes from more like covered area and less covered area. In reality, I mean, it's very hard to see them. This was after the third layer. It looked a bit better than perfect. According to the product sheet, the paint was supposed to dry in 2 hours. In reality, it was still a bit tacky after 4 hours, so I painted it on 3 consecutive days. Painting with the roller gave it an orange peel structure, not something you would want to have after painting a plane, but for a trailer it looks good and hides all the imperfections. Then it was just to have finishing touches. I built a ramp, secured an aluminium C-profile for guiding the tail wheel. I have a roller in the end and a manual winch. The winch is bolted directly to the floor, so I cannot use the handle, but the handle is detachable, so I use my powerful cordless drill to winch the plane up. The black cable goes all the way from the connector in the front to a junction box. Then most of the cables go to the door and run on this protective metal profile. The white cable channel you see is for powering all the position lights around. For securing the front wheels, I used a pair of fixed chucks on the back, and then when I roll in the plane, I put the front chucks and secure them to the back ones with these metal pins. Also, I can tie the wheels down to eye bolts. On the back, I tie the tail down to the C-channel. Also, I have 2 small chucks on both sides of the tail wheel. One is permanently fixed and the other one is removable and is secured by a pin that goes through the C-channel. In the end, I loaded the plane and the wings and added extra weight that should represent the engine and check the hitch bow weight. It was 67 kilos with the plane and 90 kilos without. So when the plane is loaded, the center of gravity moves backwards. My car can handle only 75 kilos of bow weight, and I had to take the trailer empty to the road inspection. So I needed to drive around 200 kilometers both ways, and that's why I had to decrease the bow weight. I removed the OSB on the back and placed around 50 kilos of weight there. Then the bow weight decreased to 69 kilos when empty. I changed to new wheels, did the brakes, and took it to road inspection. They were quite impressed with the build, checked everything and approved it. The only small problem was that the brakes needed to be adjusted a bit, but that's a trivial part. The actual rebuild was approved and I got new registration certificate. The old one is on the top and the new one is on the bottom. The max weight is still 1,400 kilos. The empty weight decreased from 1,160 to 875 kilos, and that is including the extra weight I added. The max payload is 525 kilos, and if I remove the extra weight, it will be 575. And that is much more than the official empty weight of Sonoray 2, which is 236 kilos. For those of you who wonders about the costs, here is the breakdown. Epoxy and fiberglass costed the most. The three other categories costed roughly the same: styrofoam, metal structure, and new axles. That is including argon gas to TIG weld everything. The materials for the floor costed a bit less, and the rest of the categories took the remaining 1/4 of the costs. Altogether 5,200 euros plus a lot of work, but it was indeed worth it. So that was a video about how I built my trailer. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss when I upload the video in like 10 years from now, how I rebuilt my plane or upload some other random stuff that you are not interested in. No, just don't do it. Anyway, thanks for watching.